A very well-known communications professional in San Francisco has a book under his arm, Upon This Rock, a story full of suspense, a tragedy set in Italy. Here are the details. David Eugene Perry is one of the most respected public relations professionals in San Francisco, and he has also been very active in the LGBT community. Now he has a book, Upon This Rock, about a gay couple who investigates a mysterious suicide in Italy.
And without giving away the plot, it's set in Italy, and a young couple from San Francisco, two men, come upon a mystery. A young student for the priesthood supposedly jumps from the rocks of the medieval town of Orvieto and kills himself because he's denied the priesthood. And these two gentlemen from San Francisco begin to wonder, was it suicide? And if it wasn't, who killed him? And it takes place during Christmas of 2013. And it is, Armistead Maupin, the author of Tales of the City, called it an elegant, twisty thriller. And
David and husband Alfredo spent time in Italy on a sabbatical a few years ago. It was the town of Orvieto, where they lived, that brought to David a strong desire to write a story based on something that had actually happened a few years prior to their arrival.
Oh, let me ask you, so what made you write it, or how did you come up with the idea?
Yeah, my husband Alfredo Casuso and I went to Orvieto for 3 months on a sabbatical because our best friend, 4 of them, had all died within a year, and we were their caretakers. And we just needed a break. And I knew that I was going to write something. I thought I was going to write a book about ship history. But when we got to Orvieto, we fell upon a true story. A young man who was accused of being gay. He was going to be ordained a priest, and he was so distraught he killed himself. This is a true story. And I became obsessed with the true story and also began to wonder, how cruel this was. And the more I learned about the real event, the more I realized that I thought this was a setting for a novel.
The book came to life last year in September. It is selling extremely well, and it already won an award. But there is also something important that David would like the readers to know about his book.
What do you expect the reader to come out from after reading your book?
Well, thank you for that. I mean, people have called it a real thriller. It's a way to really experience this town of Orvieto. But for me, what I want people to take away is the fact that all of us are refugees. Everyone in this novel is a refugee in some sort. And the backdrop to the novel when I was writing it was the refugee crisis in Italy. People coming from Africa, risking their lives in these tiny boats to escape the war in Libya and Syria. So there was the real refugee crisis, but also psychologically, everyone in this book is a refugee from somewhere. So I hope that people come to a more compassionate understanding of our own shared humanity, whether it's Italy, Syria, Libya, or the streets of San Francisco.
And I have 2 more questions. How did you find out you're a natural writer? I mean, you've been in communications and PR, but how was this something you wanted to do?
I always knew that I would write a novel. I've been writing since I was literally 5 years old. And I wrote a novel that I never quite finished in the early days of the AIDS pandemic. And it's interesting, I put it in my drawer, I think because psychologically I thought if I finished it somehow I would die myself. So now 40 years after the beginning of the AIDS pandemic, I find we're in another pandemic or ending one. So the character that I created 40 years ago, I think now I'm going to finish the novel with him 40 years older. So I've been writing a lot of press releases, a lot of speeches, worked in public relations for 36 years, but this is my first published book.
And this is fiction, or how would you call it?
Oh no, this is fiction. This is absolute fiction. Anyone in the book that you recognize, maybe they're inspired by someone you know, but everyone in the book is fictional, except for a couple of popes who I make up language for, but it's based on real people, but it is fiction.
And my last question, so what's coming up? I mean, you have another novel. Does that mean you're going to be writing books until forever?
I hope so. I mean, I'm 59 years old, and I've already started the sequel to this book. So I'm hoping that as I get older, I'll be able to churn out a book every couple of years. So I've already started on the sequel to this. And right now, this one's selling well. It's won 1 award, and we're beginning to do, now that COVID is beginning to get a little better, beginning to do in-person book signings.
Upon This Rock is available on Amazon. Remember, June is Pride Month.